Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Goodness Over Darkness podcast. I'm your host, Todd Armstrong, and I just wanted to say, if you've made it this far, that you've probably wondered why there hasn't been any stories of goodness yet. Well, that's because the first 5 or maybe even 6 episodes are going to be about my darkness. And then the next 5 or 6 episodes will be about the goodness. And then after that, you'll start hearing interviews of other people's stories of goodness overcoming the darkness. And if anybody wants to be interviewed, or if anybody wants to send me an email with their story and would want me to read it off, then you can send me an email at thegreatchakraawakening777@gmail.com. And as you can tell by now, I don't have very many technical skills. I don't know how to edit all that great, or I'm not good with all the equipment just yet, but I have ordered a new computer, so I'll be able to do more things with that, because right now I'm using a Chromebook, little laptop that's not very powerful, and I'm going to have a hardwired internet so the mic won't be cutting out. And, I'm trying to get better with each time that I turn on the microphone. I'm trying to do a better job. So, in the first 3 episodes, we talked about things that were weird that happened to me first episode in my teenage years, and then we moved into my addiction and going to jail, and my ex-fiance's relationship and my together, our relationship. And then in episode 3, it was about how music and sports influenced my life. Well, now episode 4, I want to go over what was occurring during the jail years and immediately following. Sorry, my phone went off. So, when I had mentioned that when I had went to jail, that I was on 23-hour lockdown and 1 hour out. That's how it was supposed to be, but it was actually 23 and a half hours we were locked down, and the other half hour we were allowed out. Now, we were supposed to have an hour, but there were 2 cells with 4 people in each one, so they each got out at their 30 minutes. And there was only a hallway about 100 feet long, and you had one phone on one end, one phone on the other end. That's all you could do. So that's how I began life in jail. And then, this was in Delaware County. One movie, Law Abiding Citizen, was filmed in Delaware County at the old prison across the street from this one. It's George W. Hill. Man, that one was rough. But it wasn't all that bad. No, scratch that. I mean, jail sucks no matter what jail you're in. But there's different things you can do that make life easier in different jails. And state prison was much easier. You're allowed to do more. You have more rights, I guess, in a sense. You're allowed to do more when you're in state prison than you are when you're in county. So I was on that medical lockdown for 2 weeks, 23 and a half hours lockdown. And the other 30 minutes we could go to one end of the hallway on a phone or the other end. And I was high the first 5 days or so I was in there. And I was just dreading to get out. Wanting to get out, wanting to go get high, run the streets. I look back on it now and I see how me physically going to jail was a metaphor of the jail that my mind was already in. I was stuck in this place where I couldn't do anything without thinking first of getting high or acquiring the drugs or acquiring the money to get drugs, but it's all based around wanting to get high. And I was trapped in there. I realized that everything that physically happens only happens because that is how God's trying to communicate to us what we're doing to ourselves spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So you can look at anything, and if you know what scale it's on, it's the old saying, as above, so below. There's a scale of everything, of its relation to you, and everything is a reflection of you. So, me going to jail was a reflection of me putting my brain in a prison of addiction. And boy, did my brain do some hard time. So county jail, I ended up becoming a worker there, and I got paid $10 a week. There was like 6 of us, and we just ran the block, if food came or whatever. We would hand it out. We'd be the first ones to get there. So we were allowed to, if there were extras, we would take extras, or, we could dish them out to whoever we wanted to. I mean, it caused fights all the time. I never got in a fight, actually, but in jail, but it happened, all the time. Over food. Because the food they feed you isn't very good, so when something is good, there's a fight over it. And they don't feed you very much, so when someone is hungry and there's extra food and it's not being given to them, it's a cause for a fight. So they happened often, but I mean, it was cool getting paid $10 a week because I didn't really get money too often put on my books. Not that I deserved it. I'm not suggesting that. But it was nice to be able to order some food because like I said, there wasn't enough and it wasn't very good. But when you had commissary and you could buy stuff, that was much better, and you could actually eat real food because you were spending money. So, private prison, they want money. So, yeah, I did that. That was 5.5 months or so, maybe 6 months. I was in county jail. And then I went up to Graterford for, I think, like 3 days to get classified. And then I got sent to Camp Hill. Camp Hill was very strict. Yeah, it was not a fun time at Camp Hill. Again, I got stuck because I took this program called State Intermediate Punishment, or the SIP program, SIP. Because I took that was a drug program. And you had to wait to specific times in order to get into the therapeutic community. And and before that, you have to get on to the only block that does SIP in Camp Hill. So you have to wait a certain amount of time. So we went to, I believe, J block. I think I went to J block. And we were the only ones that did SIP. Or H block. Okay. Yeah, I know I was next to I block. But I was on H. So for SIP, you had to spend 3 months on H block, which is just sitting in jail. Everybody on your block is waiting to go to SIP. So you're just in your cell. You're allowed out for morning rec, afternoon rec, and night rec. That's where you do your bidding. People, that's where you hang out. You play cards all the time, and in county too. You play cards all the time. You play board games. You make chi-chis. You make all kinds of different foods. Different people make wine, and different prisons have access to different illegal drugs and all sorts of shit. And I didn't do anything like that. I didn't even exercise, but they had gym out there, they had a track. I walked the track a lot with my buddy John. He was from Delaware County too. We didn't know each other before there, but we knew the same people. He was much older than I was. Yeah, there's a couple people from back home that I went to jail with. Not together, but we got moved together. So yeah, Camp Hill, that was interesting. They took me a couple weeks to get moved on to H block. I forgot I was telling that story. It took us a couple weeks to get me on H block. So before that, you're sitting in quarantine in a isolated room. An indoor only. Like even when you have rec, it's an indoor box, basically. It's like an indoor basketball gym, but a tiny one. And you have 40, 50 people, and you guys are just basically, you can play basketball or you can just hang out. And you couldn't smoke in the quarantine block. And this is when I still smoked cigarettes. So I started smoking cigarettes at age 14. So maybe 13, but it's probably 14. Around there anyway. And I had quit, actually, when my daughter's mom got pregnant. So my ex-fiance, when she got pregnant, I quit smoking until she was about 7 months pregnant, and then I gave in and started smoking again. So in county jail, you can't smoke. But, we would still get tobacco and smoke. But you couldn't, you weren't allowed to have it. You weren't supposed to have it. But in state prison, you could. So, you order it and you roll up, or you can order actual packs of cigarettes, but they were so expensive. And in state, you have to have a job, but they pay you, I forget what it was. Might have been like 84 cents a day or something. I forget what it was. But because I was in the SIP program, that's what we got paid to do. There was the TC, the therapeutic community. But we were all forced to clean anyway because, by the time I was in there, that was Quijana. Oh, man. That's the military boot camp. I'll get into that, but let me finish Camp Hill first. But at Camp Hill, I think I got paid at Camp Hill too. Because we were H block, we had to be separated from everybody else. Because it was basically, we're an experiment. So they want to keep us all, separated from the other mice. You got your murderers and rapists and arsonists, and then you got your, robberies and burglaries. Then you got your, drugs and assault. You got all people, so this is at the stage, at Camp Hill is at the stage where you're going to get sent to your home jail. So you're not really too mixed up in how they're classifying everybody. So they're keeping everybody pretty compact with age and race and crimes, or the area that you came from. There's different classification. I'm not privy to all that stuff, but at Graterford, that's the first one you go to get classified. But they just basically put you in a age range. There's like a 10-year age range that they'll put you in, and as long as you're the same race, and they'll do that all the way down. Like they'll do like a block of like 6 people will be all between age 26 to 36 white males, and then the next 3 cells will be like age 45 to 55, something like that, of white males, just all the way down, and all, starting from kids to all the way up. There was a father and son in there because they were contractors and they weren't finishing working for the people. There's all types of different stuff going on in in jail settings, like who's in there and what for, and everybody, for the most part says that they're innocent, but you don't really know what someone's in there for. They could be lying to you. It would happen where people would all of a sudden there would be a rumor that they're in there for sexual assault or something after, like, they would be friendly with a lot of people on the block, and maybe like 3 months would go by, and then they find out it's like a sexual assault or something, and then that's it. So, people were hesitant to tell other people, exactly what they're in there for, which then makes everyone suspicious anyway. So, I mean, for us, once we were in Camp Hill, once you get classified to Camp Hill, we all knew that we were all on SIP because we were the only block that did SIP. And there's only there was 2 jails that took people for SIP, and it was Chester, which is in Delaware County, which is, would have been right down the street from my house, from my parents anyway, and I could have got visited all the time. But instead, I got sent to Quijana, which is northeast of Pittsburgh, but not too far east. A little bit, but not too much. But it's mostly north. And man, that place. So that's a boot camp. And yes, they are up in your face, exactly as you would imagine it. The boot camp is not fun at all. Now, we weren't boot campers, so again, we were separated from the boot campers, but we still shared the same COs. So they weren't the same way with us as they were with the boot campers, but they were still, just about there. They were just a little bit lighter because we were an experiment. They have all these statistics. They want to know if it's helping and blah, 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 blah. So from there, you have to wait in a waiting block to get to the TC. So while I was on the waiting block, there were 2 people who were with me in Camp Hill, obviously, because, we were all going to the same place. It just depends, you all get there within the same couple of weeks. So 2 of them, they escaped. And I think they escaped for like 23 hours and got caught. And then they got sentenced like 5 to 10 years. And then the one guy, it was rumored that the one guy tried hanging himself right after he got caught. So, there was no fence there. There was no fence around this because it was a boot camp. They expected nobody would run because it's a much lighter sentence. They took years off. But because we were SIP, none of us were doing real hard time anyway. Maybe 3 to 6, 4 to 8. 3 to 6 and 4 to 8. I mean, that is some time. But when that gets now cut down to 7 months, you're like, all right, I'm not going to run. And the boot campers, they would get like a 4 to 8 or 5 to 10 would be cut down to a 1 to 2, or however long it took them to finish boot camp. I don't know their exact details or anything. But it was a a very different experience from the other jails, in that the COs were on you about everything. The other jails, okay, in county jail, the COs, most of them were corrupt. So there was always a way to get around everything and to get whatever you wanted. Now, in state jails, it was a little more difficult. Not that I did any of this stuff. I'm just saying that state jails were a little more strict. Like, county jails weren't as strict, but then you get some guys that were, like wannabe cops, and, they would be super strict in the county. But mostly everyone else really didn't care. And then the state, you got people who care. But then you can get worse stuff in there because, if they're corrupt, it's on a higher level, most likely. But then you have the boot camp, and they're used to being drill sergeants. So it was tough. We had to walk in single file lines, quiet, hands to our sides, like a half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile to the cafeteria every day, and it's up in the mountains, and it snowed every day from October until April. I mean, every day. And the wind was so bitter, whipping in your face. Oh, and we had female SIP participants. But they were not on the same blocks with us, but we would get to see them. Time to time, we would see each other in the lunchrooms, or maybe we'd be walking by each other from like the library or cafeteria, or not the cafeteria, the gymnasium or something, which is interesting. No fences, and it's men and women. So they control us with in your face. It's just no nonsense at all. You're not getting away with anything in the boot camp. Right, there is no corruption there. So that was interesting. Now, I started working out towards the end of my stay at the boot camp. I think it was like my last, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I started working out. And it was just something that came to me that I should start working out. Before that, I just got really good at every game. And, all we did on our downtime was play board games or cards. We watched TV a little bit here and there. Mostly sports if that was on, or it would be an award show if that was on. But it's hard for a lot of people to agree, so, actually, there were a bunch of people that would watch certain shows on certain nights at certain times and all that. That was in every jail. Everyone had their shows, even in jail. You can have your own TV in your cell. You can buy one, and you watch in there, or you watch in the day room. But I just stuck to playing board games and cards. And I got really good at everything. Pinochle, spades, every board game imaginable. Uno, we did everything. Sorry, and it would be competitive as could be, always. And we would have a good time doing it. But then I started working out instead. When I finished up, I just felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing. So I actually got held up there 1 week because they were called the DATS. I forget what it stood for. DATS. DATS. I don't want to say the names, but they were like counselors, therapeutic counselors of some sort, and they worked Monday through Friday, and they come in and they would run little groups, and then they'd have us run our own groups, so we would be checking each other basically and growing from each other. Well, you're supposed to do pull-ups, which is a thing where you basically tell on somebody that they're doing wrong. You want to pull them up. You want to make them accountable. That's what it's supposed to be, is that you want to make them accountable for what they did wrong. So you're telling them in a group setting. But it's jail. So that's just snitching. So you're just snitching on someone. So by the time that I was one of the ones that was like the eldest in the, for being on the block, because what would happen is you'd rotate probably like 8 to 16 people off of your block each week. They would finish. Not each week, I think it'd be a few weeks. They'd finish, and then you would have more people, rotate on the block. And then you have to be on there for, I think it's 4 months. So by the time I was like on the block for 3 months, you're one of the elderly people on the block. So the DATs look to you guys as leaders. And there went weeks at a time without a pull-up. I think it was 2 weeks in a row there was no pull-ups. And they thought it was because we weren't snitching. Now, yeah, we weren't snitching, but we weren't doing anything wrong. We were just playing cards all the time. Now, we would gamble with our commissary, which we weren't supposed to do, but we're not going to tell... nobody is going to put a pull-up in for that. So what happened is they held us up. They held me up a week. I was supposed to leave the day after Easter 2016. And they held me up until the next week. So then, that sucked. Because what happened with that was my next step was 2 months in a rehab. So what occurred was I would have gone out of the rehab into what comes after the rehab is the halfway house. So I would have gotten the halfway house like 3 or 4 days before my daughter's birthday. And they held me up a week. So then I missed her birthday because I was still in the rehab instead of the halfway house. I was watching something today about the Mothman prophecies and how it's a remote viewer saw the Mothman as more like a butterfly that's energetically attuned, and a being that travels through time, following energies to affect it as the butterfly effect. One little butterfly ripple here can cause a wildfire over there. So that's what the Mothman does. This is what this guy was saying, is that it chases it around, and it's, that butterfly effect from nobody really doing anything wrong, so no pull-ups are put in the box, and because of that, now I miss my daughter's birthday. Obviously, I was meant to be, or God wouldn't have done it that way. It was to teach me a lesson. And to add another layer to it, the day that I was supposed to get out, which I said was the day after Easter, so Easter night, the person who possibly snitched on me overdosed. And it had been weighing on my mind, whether I was going to confront this person or not. Because there was evidence leading towards this person had ratted me out. But then there's evidence that maybe not. Maybe it was just coincidence. Happenstance. Who knows? But I was wrestling with the thought nonetheless. And what happened? He died, and I never got a chance to even ask. Because I got held up that 1 week. So, anyway, I spent 2 months in the rehab, and that place was wild as could be. Way worse than the state prison I was just in, boot camp. They had crack, they had heroin, they had Suboxone. This place, the people were hopping the fence every day. This place was nutty. This place was so wild. Just one big blur, 2 months. And I worked in the kitchen again, and more BS because people wanting food and there is not enough, and it's not our fault. They wouldn't give us enough, or they would, because what they would do is they try to give us an exact amount, and maybe they'd short us, or maybe they give us the exact amount and someone would take two, and then there'd be a fight. It was just such a problem all the time, and that food was such garbage. We were able to order out from a Chinese place or an Italian place 4 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But that gets expensive. And, that adds up. But that food was so bad. And you could have real cigarettes in this place too, obviously. They have crack and heroin. Obviously, you can have real cigarettes. I guess you weren't supposed to have the crack and heroin, but they did. So then I went to a halfway house in North Philly, right down the street from Temple University. So that was cool because I was 26. So college age girls all around. I was 26. It was a good time. Just being able to be out of jail, and now right down the street from a college university, and right down the street from the Hood. I'm on 18th Street. I'd say the Hood started on 17th. And I was on 16th, and the Hood started on 17th. And Temple was on Broad Street, which would have been 14th. So, it was all right there. And I had someone overdose in the house while I was there. He was someone who, we went through the whole thing together because we were an experiment, so they kept us all together by region and all that. So he overdosed in the house. On the other side of the house, so there were two sides, so I didn't see it. I didn't see him or anything, but during count time, they found him. There were other guys who always got their ass whooped because they went looking for drugs of some sort, and they would get jumped and robbed because that's what happens. So that would happen a lot. But there was a workout bench in the basement we could work out with. So that was cool. I did that. Because I was still going on. So those last few weeks of Quijana boot camp to the halfway house, I was working out the entire time. And I'd gotten put on pretty good, I don't want to say muscle mass, but from what I was to what I became, I grew. I was visibly bigger. And slimmer at the same time. As you start exercising, that tends to happen. So, I was in there for 6 months. Then, while we were in there, we had to do, I got a job, which was working overnight at a bakery as a dishwasher, and I had to go through the Hood at like 3 a.m. on Erie and Broad. I had to catch the bus there at 3 a.m. and it was such a pain to do it every night. I mean, it was right out front of the cheesesteak place, so they were open that late. They were just closing, and I'm going to work. So every day I'm just hoping that nobody messes with me, and nobody did. It was quite the adventure. So that's, for 6 months, I was a dishwasher. Well, at first I was hired as a driver, and then my license got suspended after I got out of jail. So then I had to stop driving and became a dishwasher. And then after I got my license back, I became the supervisor, and then I became the driver manager. So, I showed dedication, and I worked hard, and I went from washing dishes overnight, taking the bus, taking 2 hours to get there, or 2 hours to get home, taking subways and buses and trains and trolleys and Ubers and going through the Hood in the middle of the night. It was quite the adventure getting to and from work. So I also had to do these classes, drug classes, kind of like AA and NA. So that was cool. You had to do it 4 times a week for 2 months, and then 3 times a week, then 2 times a week for 2 months, and then 1 day a week for 2 months. And I did it, no problem. but I didn't need to go to NA or AA on the side. I stopped being an addict while I was in jail. I kept praying. So it was those prayers that I said in episode 2, day 91, I was no longer an addict. And this is now 2 years later, and I'm still, at this point I'm talking about in the story, it's 2 years later, and I'm still not an addict. But I'm learning stuff. So I applied myself, which most people don't, which is why they don't really get too much out of it. But I really applied myself, and I got out of it exactly what I put in. So I met all my requirements. I never got a write-up because I was determined to better myself, because I knew I had gotten to a place that I didn't belong in, that I shouldn't have been in. I didn't understand at the time what I understand now, that I was mentally in a jail. I didn't understand that, but I knew that I was in a place I didn't belong by my own doing, by a series of bad decisions landed me in a position and in a place that I wasn't built to be in. I wasn't designed for that. So I did what I needed to do to get out of that unscathed as best as I could. So after 6 months, maybe it was before 6 months, I forget exactly when, but I was able to start transitioning back to my parents' house from the halfway house. So I would spend the first week, I spent one night at my parents' house, and then the next week was 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then 7. Then I was able to just check in with the halfway house once a week, and I think I did that for like the final month or 2. But I never failed a drug test. I didn't do any drugs, so it's not like I was just past it. But no, I didn't do any drugs. I was still working out, and I had my license. I had a car, and I was a driver manager, and I got a really good deal on my car, and that was such a big deal for me at the time. But yeah, alright, so I guess I got about 10 more minutes here that I could touch on some other little details that I might have missed. So, okay, I wanted to touch on how the COs were ragging on Philly sports all the time. So I'm in the western half of the state, and they're all Pittsburgh fans. And I don't know if it's a jealousy thing of the bigger city, Philadelphia, or maybe it's just a hatred, whatever. It's a division tactic, however it's programmed into them. It's a programming thing. But they were always talking bad about Philly and the people from Philly. And it made me very defensive because I identified with Philly because that's where I was from. Even though I didn't identify with the Eagles, I identified with many things in Philly. So then that made me want to identify with the Eagles, because if I'm going to identify with something, then I should identify with it in total. So I started identifying with the Eagles, and I became an Eagles fan. I mean, they were all the time. It was talking bad about Philly all the time. There weren't too many of us from the eastern half of the state, or especially, right in Delaware County, Chester County, or Montgomery County, or Philadelphia County. There weren't very many of us. And that's the greater Philadelphia area. And another thing that I talked about that I wanted to touch on was that my buddy. Okay, so I want to back up. So my buddy that died before the Eagles had that season where they won the Super Bowl. So he died in the summer before that. And I just wanted to touch on that relationship a bit because, it was a big event in my life. So my friend, him and I, my friend George, him and I were the best friends. Well, when we were teenagers, it was Jesse, George, and I. We called ourselves Triple H. We're stupid kids, and then we made up Spanish names for ourselves that all began with J's, but we called ourselves Triple H because they sound like they had H's. So it was Jose, Jorge, and Jesus. So I was Jesus. But George and I, we were like brothers, We were so close, and we were so much alike, and just, the whole thing with being best friends with somebody. He was truly my best friend on every level until I became a truck driver. And what occurred was he started using heroin himself at some point, and I didn't know about it. And when I became a truck driver, my fiance cheated on me so her and I worked at a pizza place type restaurant together. And she cheated on me with someone from there. So it was one of my old coworkers that I was friends with. She wanted cocaine for her birthday, so he got it for her. And then she was zooming too high, so then he busted out the heroin to help her come down. So then my buddy George started getting it for her. Started getting her heroin. And I'm sure that, she cheated on me with him. I don't know. To this day, she still says no. But it's just hard to imagine that not happening after all that happened, I had a knife stabbed in my back and torn through. And, now knowing what I know, I guess I deserve this. I thought that I deserved this for whatever reason. You reap what you sow, and your traumas are all pre-planned by you. So I guess I did that to myself. I guess I did all this to myself, Everything I'm saying, that I thought I deserved it. But still, it hurts. The struggle is still real. So then he ended up dying. He struggled with heroin for the rest of his life, and he overdosed. Whether it was accidental or on purpose, only God knows. And when I found out that he was getting her heroin, that hurt me more than when I found out, I don't want to say more than, I guess equal to, when I found out she did heroin. Yeah, I didn't know he was doing heroin, and now I'm finding out that he's not only doing it, but he's getting it for my fiance. And to top it all off, at that going away party that I mentioned in episode 2, or maybe it was 1, whatever, he says to me, "Hey, I'll watch out for them when you're not here." Talking about my fiance and my daughter. "Hey, I got your back when you're not here. If you need someone to rely on, I'll help them out." And that's how he helped me out, by getting my fiance heroin. But it is what it is now. But then, at that time, it hurt me so unbelievably much. I lost my fiance, who I very much felt was my soulmate. Her and I were like a match made in heaven, it felt like. And him and I, we were like brothers. You know, I lost two of my favorite people when I was at a very impressionable age, teenage years. And I lost them both to the heroin addiction. Now my daughter's mom's still alive, but I don't know her anymore. She doesn't know me. I mean, literally. I don't want to get into it, but it's just, you know, when they're lost, she's lost. He's dead. So when he died, it hurt somewhat. I went to his funeral. I didn't shed a tear. I hugged his mom and his sister, and they were happy that I still came. Of course I would go. We had a lot of good memories together. But, you know, that was what do you do when someone does that to you? It's made me spiral out of control. I didn't even mention that as part of the reason, you know, that was part of my influence. That was one of the things that was going on. It wasn't just my fiance, it was my best friend too. And a former coworker who was a friend was the one that introduced her to him, was cheating on, she was cheating on me with him. That was a very, very hard time. So, there's episode 4. It was not the best times going through what I went through in jail and the events leading up to jail. But it is all necessary for where I am today and the understandings that I've come to and the things that I've come to know. And all of this trauma that I'm bringing up is all part of it. It's all part of my story. It is my darkness. And you'll see in the coming episodes, the goodness is about to break through the light. But before that, next episode I'm going to touch on something that I never even planned on touching on. And I've said it to one person ever, and now I'm just going to put it on the podcast. Because I know that it might help someone somewhere. And I'm going to have to speak my truth no matter what anyone else thinks of it. I don't really mind how any human judges me. All that matters is how God judges me. And I judge myself on a regular basis, trying to base myself off of how God would judge it. And I think God would want me to speak my truth. So you can look forward to that in the next episode. So I don't think the next episode is going to be all that long, but it's going to be kind of heavy. So, if I inspire you to speak of your story of goodness overcoming darkness, send me an email at thegreatchakraawakening777@gmail.com, and I can either read off the email if that's what you would like, or maybe we could have a conversation and you could tell the world your story. You can find me on Facebook at Todd Armstrong, and I have the same Goodness Over Darkness logo as my main picture. And you can find me. I was interviewed on The Wrong Warp. You can find that. I was with Ketsuban. I have a couple more interviews coming out shortly here that you guys might like. Well, I think that's it for now. Yeah, I don't have any other social media at the moment, just the email and the Facebook. And I'm pretty active in the Soul Space Facebook group and the Wrong Warp Facebook group. So you can find me. There's a lot of good people in those Facebook groups, and a lot of people who know their stuff. So, if you're interested, you can find me there. Alright guys, have a good one.